So people ask, why does it matter? So there's one reason why it matters. The next question we often get asked a lot is, man, those are really compelling numbers. Why hasn't this happened outside of the Defense Department yet? And the answer is that a lot of barriers exist. Higher assurance credentials tend to come with higher costs and burdens in terms of using them. They've been very impractical for a lot of organizations to implement, certainly for single-use applications. So I have a PIV, and now within NIST, I can use it many places that I go to log into applications. I can't use it any place else that I go online. Likewise, in my private life, I do business with a brokerage that gives me a one-time password generator as a second factor to actually log in, which is actually one reason I do business with them. I appreciate the added security. They issue that at quite some cost to them. However, I can't use that anyplace else. There's simply no standards for interoperability. There's no easy way to solve liability challenges of what would happen if that solution that they gave me failed as I was using it to log into another site and then somebody sued people. There's big concerns with usability. Do people really want to carry a token? Is the PIV form factor make a lot of sense when people are using mobile devices like iPads and iPhones in the environment, and there's no way to actually insert a smart card, at least in the current form factor that we're used to seeing it, into those devices. No good one, at least. These are the types of barriers that the market has really struggled to overcome. Focusing in on these barriers and trying to work in partnership with the private sector and public sector stakeholders to come up with some solutions to them is really where a lot of the focus of the NSTIC implementation efforts have been. So what NSTIC calls for at the end of the day is for the private sector to lead the effort. There was a realization when the White House was crafting the strategy that if the government tried to actually specify a solution or set of solutions that the country would use, we'd fail. There simply is no way that we in the government are going to be able to anticipate what innovators and entrepreneurs in the private sector are going to come up with over the next few years in terms of really fantastic solutions. Frankly, it was recognized that the private sector is probably going to be in a better position than a government program to ensure that the ecosystem offers improved online trust and better customer experiences. We're good at some things in the government, but trying to figure out, a digital identity technology or technologies is not probably where we should be working. So, we've held back from that and, tried to make clear from the start, this is not a government-run identity program. What it is a partnership. And where we are looking as a partner as the federal government is to provide support in a number of areas. So we've done a lot of work helping to develop a private sector-led governance model to actually bring different stakeholders together in a new organization called the Identity Ecosystem Steering Group that I'll talk about a bit more later. Since we're NIST, we're pretty good at helping to facilitate and lead development of standards for interoperability in the ecosystem. The government can also provide clarity on some important policy and legal issues on some of the thorny topics like liability and privacy, where there is not any set of rules today. And frankly, one thing you hear from the private sector is until you solve that, this thing's going to have a hard time taking off. We can fund pilots in partnership with the private sector to actually stimulate the marketplace and demonstrate ways that the ecosystem can actually be deployed. And as a government, we can be an early adopter of federated identity solutions to help stimulate demand. So our implementation strategy is kind of simple. We don't want to boil the ocean. For starters, it's kind of hard to do so. The only way I know how to do it is to get a volcano, and those are a little bit hard to come by. Certainly when going out to the private sector and telling them that you want to boil the ocean and basically start over and abandon everything that they've been doing, you're not going to get too far. So in a horrible mixing of ocean metaphors, rather than boil the ocean, we've said, let's go surfing where the waves are. And by that we mean there's already a lot of entities, both in the public and private sector, who have been working to develop elements of the identity ecosystem. You have a number of trust frameworks that are out there, organizations like the Open Identity Exchange, Kantara, Safe Biopharma, Certipath, who have established identity federations where strong credentials are used interoperably between organizations. And there's a lot of other players already coming to the table with some pretty good direction in terms of where they want to go. So our interest, rather than try and get everybody to start over, is let's jump in, this is my sophisticated PowerPoint graphic, and go surfing with them and try to do a little bit of fancy footwork to impress everybody and hope that we can actually lead some of the parties who are already in the ocean towards the direction that we think it needs to go, which is the vision and guiding principles of the NSTIC strategy. I'll have no more sophisticated PowerPoint after this. So the National Program Office that's been set up within NIST, but is based downtown at the Commerce Department, was charged in the strategy with leading day-to-day coordination across both government and the private sector in implementing NSTIC. We were funded with $16.5 million for fiscal year 2012. Now that that's over, we're in a 6-month continuing resolution. like everybody else, and waiting to see what happens. But key implementation steps, there's really been three areas where we've been focused. The first is what I talked about earlier. How do you actually bring the private sector together in a way that they can all start to collaborate around a framework of standards and operating rules and policies, along with an accreditation process to support this identity ecosystem that the NSTIC envisions. So that group was created in summer 2012. We awarded a 2-year grant to a company whose sole goal was stand up a very viable, privately led steering group that could convene stakeholders and craft an identity ecosystem framework. We've also been focused quite heavily on stimulating the marketplace through pilots. We held a competitive procurement last year that resulted in September, our office awarding 5 pilots valued at $9.2 million. We had a lot of interest from the private sector in this. In fact, we had 186 initial applications. We winnowed it down to 27 finalists and then finally picked 5. I wish we had more money. We had a lot of great proposals, but we have what we have. But we really tried to take a challenge-based approach in our procurement, asking the private sector to identify certain barriers that the marketplace hasn't yet overcome, and propose some innovative solutions that could actually be a foundation to overcoming those barriers. Finally, we've been working to ensure that the government can be an early adopter to stimulate demand. It's become very clear from folks in the private sector that if government agencies aren't willing to embrace the concepts in NSTIC themselves, particularly using trusted, accredited identity providers in the commercial sector who have gone through the Trust Framework Provider adoption process that's run by the GSA FICAM office, it's going to be really hard for folks in the private sector to buy into this concept. Frankly, they think we need to eat our own dog food. So we've been spending a lot of time working with different agencies to ensure that the government actually aligns with the FICAM roadmap. We've also been working quite closely with a number of different folks in the White House and several key agencies on creation of a federal cloud credential exchange, essentially a single cloud enterprise portal that agencies could use to serve as an identity hub to manage their interactions with a lot of different accredited identity providers. Would really be an easy button for agencies to push when they want to use federated identities without having to do all the heavy lifting themselves to integrate with what could literally be dozens of accredited providers in a couple of years.